Lewis Hamilton hit the barriers at Spa, looked at the wrecked Ferrari, and said the 5 words no Formula One team ever wants to hear. "I have destroyed the car, mate." The floor was damaged. The rear suspension was damaged. The rear wing was damaged. And Ferrari had roughly 2 hours to rebuild everything before qualifying. But Hamilton's crash did not stop with one destroyed car. It triggered double yellow flags, forced Max Verstappen to slow, sent Carlos Sainz into a violent tire lockup, and brought the Williams terrifyingly close to the back of the Red Bull. Then the stewards opened a real investigation. But Hamilton was not the driver under investigation. Verstappen and Sainz were. And somehow, after the impact, the emergency repairs, and the chaos that followed, Hamilton returned to qualify 6th with a lap of 1 minute, 44.895 seconds. Only 2 thousandths behind Charles Leclerc. The crash looked like the end of Hamilton's day. Instead, it exposed one of Ferrari's most dramatic recoveries of the entire Belgian Grand Prix weekend. Subscribe to the channel. To understand how serious Hamilton's situation really was, you have to begin with the corner that changed everything. The exit of the Fanes chicane. Turn 13. A section of Spa where the car is already carrying huge speed, the tires are heavily loaded, and the driver has almost no time to recover once the ideal line begins to disappear. Hamilton ran wide in the final minutes of the 3rd practice session. That timing made the accident far worse. This was not the beginning of the day, when Ferrari still had hours to inspect the car, replace damaged parts, and test the repairs. Qualifying was approaching. The setup work was almost complete. The engineers were collecting their final data. Hamilton was supposed to be building confidence for the most important laps of the afternoon. Then the Ferrari left the circuit, and within seconds the entire weekend changed. There was another detail that made the crash even more disturbing. Pierre Gasly had suffered an almost identical accident at the same point during the previous practice session. 2 experienced Formula One drivers. The same corner. A remarkably similar mistake. That did not automatically mean the corner was unsafe, but it showed how brutally the exit could punish even a small error. At ordinary speed, running wide might mean a correction and a lost second. At Spa, it can mean losing the entire car. The tire reaches a surface with less grip. The balance changes. The rear begins to move. The driver reacts. But by the time the correction arrives, the available road may already be gone. Hamilton felt the impact immediately. Then came the radio message. "I have destroyed the car, mate." There was no long explanation. No attempt to make the damage sound smaller. No excuse. Hamilton already knew this was not going to be a simple repair. A driver feels the difference between light contact and a major impact. He feels it through the steering wheel, through the seat, through the sudden movement of the chassis, through the sound of carbon fiber breaking around him. And Hamilton's words told Ferrari that the problem was much bigger than a damaged wing. The floor was damaged. The rear suspension was damaged. The rear wing was damaged. Another report also identified damage around the right rear wheel. Any one of those problems could have threatened qualifying. Hamilton had damaged several critical areas at once. And that is where Ferrari's emergency truly began. The floor is not simply a flat panel underneath the car. It is one of the most important aerodynamic parts of the entire machine. Air travels beneath the car through carefully shaped channels. That airflow helps create pressure that pulls the car toward the circuit. The result is grip, a huge amount of grip, and most of it is created where spectators cannot easily see it. Damage the floor, and the car may lose aerodynamic stability. The rear can move unexpectedly. The balance can change as speed increases. One corner may feel manageable. The next may feel completely different. That uncertainty is dangerous anywhere. At Spa, it becomes terrifying. The circuit demands total commitment through high-speed sections. Hamilton could not enter qualifying wondering whether the floor would produce the grip he expected. Ferrari had to inspect the damage, understand how far it had spread, and restore the car to a condition Hamilton could trust. But the floor was only the first problem. The rear suspension controls how the wheel moves under braking, acceleration, and cornering load. It helps keep the tire connected to the track. If the suspension is damaged or misaligned, the car can become unpredictable. Think of pushing a shopping cart with one wheel pointing in the wrong direction. At walking speed, it feels annoying. At Formula One speed, even a tiny alignment problem can destroy confidence. Ferrari could not replace only the visibly broken part. The mechanics had to inspect every connection around it, every joint, every mounting point, every component that may have absorbed the force. Because crash damage does not always stop where the broken carbon fiber ends. The impact can send energy through the suspension and into the surrounding structure. A component may look normal in the garage, then fail when the car reaches maximum load. And Hamilton's next meaningful laps would be qualifying laps. There will be no gentle test, no long run at reduced speed, no comfortable opportunity to discover whether something still felt wrong. The car had to be safe immediately. Then there was the rear wing. That wing helps push the back of the Ferrari toward the track. It provides stability through fast corners. It also affects straight-line speed. The angle, the structure, and the mounting points all have to be correct. Replacing the visible wing was only part of the job. Ferrari also had to confirm that the impact had not damaged the structure supporting it. A perfect replacement wing attached to a compromised mounting point would solve nothing. So the mechanics were not facing one repair. They were facing a chain of repairs. The floor affected aerodynamic grip. The suspension affected tire contact and stability. The rear wing affected balance at high speed. And every one of those systems had to work together. Ferrari had roughly 2 hours. That sounds manageable until you understand what had to happen. The damaged car had to be recovered. The broken components had to be removed. The mechanics had to clean the affected areas. The engineers had to search for hidden damage. Replacement parts had to be prepared. The floor had to be fitted. The suspension had to be rebuilt. The rear wing had to be installed. The alignment had to be checked. Every system had to be tested. Then the entire car had to pass Ferrari's internal safety inspections. And every task depended on the previous one being completed correctly. The team could not finish the alignment before rebuilding the suspension. It could not fit the final aerodynamic parts before confirming the mounting points were secure. It could not send Hamilton onto the circuit while any uncertainty remained. This was not a race to make the Ferrari look repaired. It was a race to make the car capable of surviving maximum attack at one of the fastest circuits in Formula One. That difference is enormous. The mechanics needed urgency. They could not allow panic. Working quickly could save qualifying. Working carelessly could create another accident. Every bolt mattered. Every measurement mattered. Every inspection mattered. The clock continued moving. The required standard did not change. And Hamilton could do almost nothing. That may have been one of the hardest parts for him. The mistake was his. The consequences belonged to the entire team. He could not replace the floor. He could not rebuild the suspension. He could not repair the rear wing. He could only wait while Ferrari tried to save his afternoon. And waiting after a mistake creates its own pressure. Hamilton knew why the garage had suddenly become chaotic. He knew Ferrari's planned preparation had been destroyed. He knew the mechanics were working against the clock because of what had happened at Faines. And even if the repairs were completed, he would still have to return immediately to the same circuit that had just punished him. There would be no slow return to confidence. Qualifying demands commitment almost immediately. The tires need the correct temperature. The battery must be prepared. Traffic must be managed. The braking zones must be attacked. The fast corners demand trust. Hamilton had to understand the accident without allowing it to control the next lap. Ignore the mistake completely, and he could repeat it. Think about it too much, and hesitation would appear. Hesitation changes the braking point. It changes the steering input. It changes the throttle application. And in qualifying, hesitation becomes lap time. The best drivers do not simply forget an accident. They process it. They identify what happened. They decide what must change. Then they return to the limit. Hamilton would need to complete that entire mental recovery before Ferrari even knew whether the car could return. But while the mechanics worked inside the garage, the consequences of the crash were still spreading across the circuit. The impact had left debris behind. Marshals needed protection while clearing it. Double yellow flags were displayed. That is one of the clearest warnings a driver can receive. Danger ahead. Reduce speed significantly. Be prepared to stop. Max Verstappen approached the area in his Red Bull. He slowed. Carlos Sainz was directly behind him in the Williams. Then the situation changed in an instant. Sainz was surprised by the reduction in speed ahead. He braked hard. The tires locked severely, and the Williams came frighteningly close to the back of Verstappen's car. Hamilton's solo crash had almost created a second accident, this time between two moving cars. Verstappen reacted immediately over the radio. "What the fuck? My God, it's like double yellows, and this car, it almost crashes in the back of me. Unbelievable." His anger came from the shock of the moment. He had slowed because the double yellow flags required him to slow. From inside the Red Bull, Sainz had suddenly appeared far too close. The safety procedure designed to protect marshals had almost ended with Verstappen being struck from behind. Sainz saw the incident differently. The car in front braked quite sudden. That short message revealed the entire misunderstanding. Verstappen believed he had slowed normally under double yellow flags. Sainz believed the Red Bull had reduced speed more sharply than expected. Both drivers were responding to the same danger, yet their separate reactions almost created another one. And this is where Hamilton's crash became much larger than one damaged Ferrari. The original accident had already ended. Hamilton's car had stopped, but the consequences were still moving through the circuit. The debris created the warning. The warning forced Verstappen to slow. Sainz reacted behind him. The tires locked. The gap disappeared. And suddenly, the stewards had another incident to examine. Hamilton was not placed under investigation for the crash. A solo mistake during practice does not normally produce a personal sporting penalty. The investigation focused on Verstappen and Sainz. Officials needed to determine whether either driver had failed to reduce speed sufficiently under the double yellow flags. Representatives from Red Bull and Williams were summoned as well. The hearing was scheduled for 2:25 in the afternoon, local time. One mistake at turn 13 had now created pressure in 3 different places. Ferrari was rebuilding Hamilton's car. Red Bull was preparing to explain Verstappen's actions. Williams was preparing to explain Sainz's response. And the most important detail was still hidden. The investigation was real. The danger was real. But the stewards would eventually decide that neither Verstappen nor Sainz had broken the rules. No penalty for Verstappen. No penalty for Sainz. The officials described the moment as a misunderstanding, with both drivers judged to have complied with the regulations. That verdict removed the punishment. It did not remove the fear. Sainz had still locked his tires heavily. Verstappen had still believed he was about to be hit from behind. And all of it happened under a warning designed to make the circuit safer. That is what made the incident so unsettling. Nobody needed to break the rules for the danger to appear.